Welcome back to Virtually Viking Radio Show. I'm your host, Sunshine Neely, and today we're going to be discussing all things financial aid with Suzanne Evans. Thank you, Suzanne, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Suzanne is the director of financial aid and veteran affairs. But before we dive into the topic of financial aid, we would really love to talk to you a little bit and get to know you a little better. Okay. So, Suzanne, where are you from?
Well, I'm originally from California, and I met my husband there, and he was in the United States Navy for 24 years. He was on the submarine force, and so that entailed us traveling a lot. Um, I I began my career in financial aid in the year 2000.
Oh,
So I've
wow.
been in this business for 24 years, going on 24 years. And a lot of my experience in financial aid, I've done at different stations that we've been to. So I delved my foot in the pool in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, which is where we were stationed at the time.
Oh, wow.
And then we moved to Colorado, and I worked for a campus in Colorado, which also had campuses in other states such as Minnesota and Indiana.
Oh, wow.
So, yes, I've worked for a multitude of different types of institutions, such as mainly workforce institutions, clock hour programs, quarter-based programs, you name it, I've had experience in it. So when my husband retired from the military, we decided to move out to Florida, which is where I find myself now at SGR State, and I couldn't be happier.
Well, we are excited to have you here with us.
Thank you.
So, and definitely thank your husband for his service
I
to the
will. Thank
United
you.
States. You're welcome. Now, how many years I know you said 24 years in financial aid, which is wow, you're no amateur. But how many years have you been with St. John's River State College?
So I started here April of 2017, so just over 7 years
Okay,
with St. John's River.
awesome.
And yes, I'm still excited to come to work today. I still love, working for SJR State and doing what I do.
Great. That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. So we will dive right in. And I know recently this year or in the last year there have been some changes with FAFSA, but so we'll talk about that also, as well. But
Mhm.
for those that don't know, what is FAFSA?
Absolutely. So FAFSA is an acronym for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This application is used by all colleges who offer federal financial aid to students. It's one application, it's found online, and the website is studentaid.gov, all one word. And students can go there and complete their FAFSAs. And they typically open October 1st of every year for
Okay.
the next upcoming year. So this October 1st, they will be opening up the 25-26 FAFSA application year, which begins next fall.
Now, is there a deadline? So if it opens in October, is there a particular deadline for it to end?
Some schools will have a deadline. SJR State does not have a deadline.
Okay.
But we prefer to have the students complete their FAFSAs as quickly as possible. The reason why I say that is because some aid items are on a first come, first serve basis.
Okay, that's
All
important.
right.
Mhm.
So the aid items that are offered by the federal government is the federal Pell Grant, which is considered gift aid, which is money students do not have to pay back.
Okay.
They also offer the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, also gift aid that the students do not need to be paid back. They offer the Federal Work Study Program. So if students are interested in working
Mhm.
for the college while they are attending classes, that's through the FAFSA as well. And then lastly, we offer the student loans
Okay.
should the students need or require additional aid funding items. But those are considered self-help aid, and they will eventually have to be repaid.
Okay. Okay. Now, is there what I know I know it changed over the last year. They did a big call and did some changes. What is the biggest difference from previous years to the current year?
Well, the FAFSA Simplification Act changes that went into effect, well, actually are going into effect for the 24-25 FAFSA year.
Mhm.
The SAI, or Student Aid Index, replaces the expected family contribution. So what the SAI and the EFC, they do exactly the same thing. It is a number that helps establish what the student is eligible for in terms of gift aid, free money, versus student loan funds. Or it could be a combination of both of those items. The EFC in prior years, so if anybody's completed a FAFSA in prior years, they're probably familiar with the EFC, expected family contribution number.
Okay.
Because that was so confusing to students and parents, they were thinking, is that what I have to contribute? Is that what they're going to give me? So with
Right.
the new FAFSA simplification, they just changed the terminology and got rid of EFC and replaced it with Student Aid Index, which more reflects what that number is used for to help bring down the confusion for our folks. Um,
Definitely.
in addition, there have been changes to the calculation used in the federal methodology.
Okay.
So before, it used to be that if you had a zero EFC number, you qualified for the maximum Pell Grant amount. Well, now for the 24-25, they have what's called a negative SAI. So that number can actually go into the negative and up to a negative 1,500. That doesn't mean that the student is eligible for more. It just means based on the calculation methodology, the number can now go into the negative, but the student would still keep getting the maximum federal Pell Grant eligibility if they were in a negative SAI calculation. They have removed the state or other tax allowances, which used to go into the calculation in the old FAFSA form. The small business family farm exclusion has been eliminated, and the removal of the number of family members in college has been removed from the federal methodology
Okay.
calculation. Yes. Um, this these changes actually help expand the federal Pell Grant to more students. Because what it does then is it links the eligibility of Pell Grant to the family size in comparison to the federal poverty guideline.
Okay.
And it also gives a more predictability of the Pell Grant eligibility for those for the maximum Pell Grant and the minimum Pell Grant eligibility. So it's kind of, and I have to say that financial aid offices are still learning the differences in the federal methodology.
Right.
Um, but ultimately, once all the kinks are worked out, all the bugs are worked out, this should be relatively easy for students and parents to complete the application so that the application isn't considered a burden any longer to the students and the
To the
parents.
student.
It's fairly quick, yes.
Okay. Perfect. And then the FAFSA is free to complete. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It is free to complete. And I want to dispel the myth that students and parents who think that they make too much income don't even apply for FAFSA.
And I
Because,
remember when I was in my, just like yesterday when I was in college, I remember some of my friends going, "Well, my mom, makes too much money. My mom's a lawyer. My dad's a doctor. We make all this money, so we're not even going to do financial aid."
oh,
So,
that breaks my heart when I hear that. Oh my goodness. So the cutoff for gift aid for the FAFSA is far lower than, say, for example, the state.
Hmm.
So those students who are applying for FAFSA, they may not qualify for federal Pell Grant or SCOG grant, but that doesn't mean that they don't qualify for the Florida Student Assistance Grant
Right.
or other forms of state grant. And the
Okay.
reason for that is because the SAI calculation, the number to be eligible for the state funding is far higher than it is for federal funding. But they won't know that, schools won't know that unless we have a
Unless
FAFSA
they,
form on file. I know, don't quote me the exact number, but I believe those students who qualify for federal, Florida Student Assistance Grant,
mhm.
their SAI can be up in the 9,000s,
Oh,
whereas
wow.
a cutoff for Pell Grant could be in the 6,000s.
Wow.
So
Okay.
even though they don't qualify for Pell Grant in federal based, they still may qualify for gift aid free money from the state of Florida.
Right.
That's why we encourage all students, whether they think they qualify or not, to complete a FAFSA because it's so much more than just federal money that we're looking for these students. In addition to the state funding, they may qualify for institutional funding and their
Okay.
SAI number may be low enough for a lot of this institutional funding as well. Or they may just have a need-based package. What I mean by that is we give students a cost of attendance. So each student coming to school has a cost of attendance. Some of it can be direct costs, such as tuition, fees, books, that type of thing, supplies. Um, Those are direct costs. We also have to come up with an average cost of living while they're attending school, which could be your rent, your transportation, your food, those items that you don't pay the school directly, but we have to average that into the cost of actually attending college. When you add those two things together, it comes up with a cost of attendance. So, for example, if a student's cost of attendance is $20,000 and their EFC is 10,000, or excuse me, their
Right.
SAI is 10,000, they still have a $10,000
Dollar
need.
need. Yes.
Yeah. If they still have a $10,000 need, they could qualify for institutional funding. And so institutional funding isn't always merit based, meaning you don't always have to have a 4.0 GPA.
Right. Hmm.
So we have over 180 different institutional scholarships that we offer at SGR State that a student may qualify for. But without that cost of attendance, without that FAFSA calculation, we don't know if there's need there. So we can't even
Wow.
look. We can't even
Right.
look to see if they qualify for that type of funding. So back to the FAFSA. It all begins with the FAFSA. And that's why we try to instill that in our high schools, in our
Right.
FAFSA frenzies. Please don't knock yourself out of the arena before you even start because
Definitely.
there's funding out there and we're here to help them get that funding.
Definitely, and I'm glad. That's good to know because going out this recruiting season, I do hear parents say that all the time. No, don't worry, my kid. Da da da. So I will make sure. I'm like, wait a minute. Let me tell you about something, and I will even direct them to this show so that they can hear it from you. um,
Good.
complete the FAFSA. I mean, let's do it, people.
Yes.
So now, you did mention FAFSA Frenzy, so we'll just kind of go over there, and then I'll go back to some other things. So we have some FAFSA Frenzies coming up in the fall, and we also have some coming up in the spring. But I know in Palaca on October the 7th, it's a Monday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. We will host our FAFSA Frenzy at our Palaca campus. Now, what can a student and parent expect during FAFSA Frenzy?
Well, what they can expect is we will sit down with them and we will help them begin the FAFSA. If they have everything with them, the FAFSA can take no more than 10, 15 minutes at the most.
Okay.
And what I mean by everything, social security cards for the
Okay.
student, as well as the parent.
Hmm.
We know that there are certain situations that where the student is going to need assistance through answering some of these questions.
Correct.
And so that's what we're here to do. We're here to help them through the red tape. That's why we have a job. That's why we want them to come to FAFSA Frenzy, because their questions are not the first time we've heard.
Right.
We get these questions all the
All the
time.
time.
Right. And so we know how to assist them through these FAFSA questions, um, or at least tell them the next steps of what they need to accomplish if they can't complete it that night.
Okay.
Um, Another one of the big myths that we get is that, financial aid is it's so confusing. They're just trying to, for whatever reason, not help me. And that could be further from the truth. Our job is to assist them through the government red tape. We are compliance experts. So what that means is any situation that a parent or a student finds themselves in,
Hmm.
we know what the federal student aid is looking for
Okay.
and how their situation can be put into the FAFSA so it best reflects their situation. Um, there are areas where students and parents can request a review of their circumstances. What
Okay.
I mean by that is that the tax data that the FAFSA uses is from 2 years ago. So, for example,
Okay.
the 24-25 FAFSA is looking at tax data from 2022. Well, a lot of things could have happened between 2022 and what they're currently living through. Just as an example, perhaps one of the parents retired, or if the parents got divorced and now the student is living with one parent and they just need to reflect that income. There's such a thing as what's called a professional judgment. And if a student finds themselves in a situation where the tax data that it's basing off their aid off of no
Hmm.
longer reflects what their current living situation is, the student can then explain that to the financial aid counselor, who can then suggest a professional judgment be looked at. So, what we do is we review the student's current situation to determine if updates need to be made to the FAFSA data to
Okay.
more and better reflect what their current living situation looks like. So that's part of what we do to assist the student and parent who find themselves in a situation that they're no longer in as of 2022. Um, And so it's always best to ask the financial aid advisors, whether you're going in for FAFSA help
Hmm.
or after having completed the FAFSA, to call the financial aid office and say, hey, my situation has changed. What can I do to have FAFSA review my current situation? And that might possibly change their aid eligibility for certain things.
Right. I remember last summer we attended a counselor's breakfast, and I had a counselor come up to me and tell me about a student that they completed the FAFSA, but then they got to a point about her mom not working and they didn't know which way to go. So basically they stopped completely, did not finish the process or submit it, and she had paid out of pocket for her first semester. And I was like, oh my God, no. And so
Mm.
I got her contact information and encouraged her to see someone in financial aid so that they could, help her answer those questions. And literally it came down to just not understanding the wording of the question. They were able to complete the
Wonderful.
FAFSA and
Oh,
submit
that's
it.
wonderful.
And to this day, she thinks that I'm like a superhero. And I'm like, not really. Not
Good for
really.
you.
Yes, when I see her in the store, she's like, "Thank you so much, Miss Sunshine." I was like, "Listen, it was nothing. You're welcome." But it was just heartbreaking to know
Mhm.
that she could possibly have aid, just because of one question that they didn't understand. So, I definitely encourage everybody, go talk to the experts. They're going to be able to assist you and help you, get through that. So definitely. Now, after a student and a parent completes the FAFSA, is there an expected time that they should anticipate hearing back or about their awards or anything like that?
Yes, so once they've successfully submitted their FAFSA application, it takes the Department of Education roughly between 3 to 7 business days
Okay.
to process their application. It could take longer if there are signatures missing,
Mhm.
if consent wasn't provided for one contributor. And so you want to make sure if you're completing the FAFSA that you submit with your signature. Don't just save the application. You have to
Right.
make sure that you hit the submit button for all contributors, because we find in the financial aid office that we're not being able to view their applications because they haven't been processed. Reason for it is the student saved their application and thought they submitted it, but they didn't submit it. So that's the biggest thing. Make sure you sign it, submit it, and provide consent.
Okay, perfect. Now, I did have a question. So, if a student is offered financial aid and they completed their FAFSA and all of this, but then at the last minute they decide not to attend St. John's, does that kind of packet go with them, or are you able to give it to a different student because that student didn't attend our institution?
That's a wonderful question. So, what happens is the students, once we receive the FAFSA data, we offer the student the aid that they're eligible for.
Hmm.
The student actually has to sit in classes, attend classes for us to be able to draw down those funds.
Okay.
If they never attend the college, we cannot draw down those funds. So that means if the student actually goes to another college,
Hmm.
they can award the student financial aid and then disperse those funds once the student attends.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good to know. And now that you say that, I remember that's kind of what we have, that drop ad period. And
Correct.
I remember that. Now I remember that. Now, also, will if a student so a student financial aid consists of your grants as well as your scholarships and student work study. Now, if a student has outside scholarships that they were awarded, does that affect their any grants or any FAFSA material?
It can,
Okay.
just depending on their cost of attendance. So if they get Pell Grant, if they get all of these other institutional scholarships, and then they have a private scholarship, say from an organization that they attend,
Mm-hmm.
and they bring the check to the school, if there's enough room, enough need left in their
I see.
financial aid package, then we can apply that outside scholarship. However, if everything has already been covered, what we typically do is if the student has taken out any type of self-help aid, such as student loans,
Mm-hmm.
we will reduce the student loan so that's less they have in student
Have.
loans, and then put the outside scholarship in there to help cover where we took the loan out for the exact same amount.
Perfect, perfect. That's pretty cool. That makes sense too. So definitely. Now, for students that receive no aid, no federal grants or state grants, and they have to pay totally out of pocket. Um, do we have payment options or programs for that student that's paying out of pocket solely?
We do. If they would like to set up a payment plan, and usually the payment plan is paid throughout the term that they're attending.
Okay.
What I highly suggest to students who want to set up a payment plan is to do it early, because
Right.
once classes start, that payment plan goes away. So
Okay.
they want to make sure that they get that payment plan set up. There is a small fee involved, but they can get that payment plan set up, and then they'll just be paying throughout the semester.
Okay. All righty. That is good to hear. Now, are there any tips or advice that you would give to first time parents and students that are applying for the FAFSA, or any tips to any student that is applying that you deem important or something that they should know?
Yes, yes. So if you're completing the FAFSA for the very first time, make sure the demographic information that you're inputting into that FAFSA form
Sounds
is
good.
accurate. Um, we have so many students who have a hard time trying to go back in and make corrections because they misplaced or they transposed a number in their social security number, or they have two last names and they only put in one last name. So the Social Security Administration doesn't recognize this person without both last names. Because this data goes through all of these different government agencies, such as Department of Homeland Security, Social Security Administration, IRS, all of these different agencies, you have to make sure that the data that you start with is clean and accurate. And you're going to find that on your Social Security card, because that is your official name attached to
Okay.
that Social Security number. So you can save yourself a lot of headaches if you have your tax returns with you and your Social Security cards.
Yes. Now I'll have to share another short story that you said that. Um, Previously, I worked in adult ed, and I had a student that was applying to take the GED test, a portion of the GED test. So she was taking math, and when she registered for the test, she used her nickname instead of her real name. And however, she was allowed to take that test. I'm not even sure how with that nickname. But then when she went to take the second part, she plugged in her name on her ID and her social, and so then it flagged, it wouldn't let her take any more
Oh my
exams. And then we had to let her know, you wanted, because at this point her diploma would have come out in the nickname and not her name. I said, so it would have been really hard for you to attend college with this diploma that is
yes,
somebody else's name. So that is very important. Making sure that you have the right information. And it just saves you time. It saves
yes,
everybody time and a headache. So definitely. Well, Suzanne, we thank you for talking to us today and educating us on all things financial aid.
of
And so
course.
now, if someone needed to reach the financial aid office, is there a number or an email address that they can call or
Hmm.
email?
Yes, so they can email financial aid web at sjrstate.edu, or they can contact our mainline campus, which is area code 386-312-4040.
Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing that today.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Suzanne Evans, the Director of Financial Aid and Veteran Affairs. And again, thank you for being on our show today.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.